I'll go ahead and call the October 30th meeting of the HR 169 Task Force meeting to order. On the agenda for everybody, we'll do roll call. Elizabeth, if you will.
All right, Ms. Robeson? Here. Dr. Bryant? Here. Dr. Doom?
Here.
Dr. Horzowski? On her way. Ms. Doucette? Here. Dr. Fountain?
Here.
Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Dr. Arbuthnot? Here. Able to be with us. Mr. Labriere?
Here.
Dr. Singh?
Here.
Dr. Oder?
Here.
Ms. Baker?
Here.
Dr. Russo?
Here.
Mr. Roche?
Here.
Dr. Young? Here. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on to approval of minutes. You were all sent the minutes last week in the email. Are there any questions on the minutes? Okay, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
Hello.
Okay.
Second.
All right, thank you. All right. Let's see, moving on to the next agenda item. ORP and Social Security benefits for public employees. So we have Sylvia Warren from the State Treasurer's Office, Social Security Division, to present on ORP and Social Security.
Good morning.
Hey, good
All
morning.
right.
Okay, wonderful. I was looking up.
I'm over here.
I'm all over the place
That's
today.
okay.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me today. I hope that by the end of this presentation, you have a little bit better understanding about DOP, WEP, Social Security, how it may be impacting yourself, your family members, or whatever. I realize it's a topic that's kind of hard to understand. I put some examples. If you do not have a copy of the presentation, I do have extra ones over there. Please grab one, so that way, because I'm going to be going through slide by slide. I have just recently taken over the position as the new Social Security Program Director. Angie Dowdy left in April to retire, and I came on board in July. So I've only been here a very short period of time. So what I would ask, because the topic matter is still very new to me, if you have questions that you need to have answered, what I would ask is if y'all would please, I have my business card attached to each one of them. If you would please send me your question in an email, because what I'd like to do, if I don't have an immediate answer, I'd like to research it and get the answer for you. And then I can do a blanket email to everybody that's in here today. So you may not think you want that question answered right now, and later on it may be valid. So I would ask if y'all would do that to help me out. The things that I'm going to discuss today basically is the history of the section of 218, basics on how Social Security benefits are calculated, and then we're going to go into WEP, which is the windfall elimination provision, and GPO, which is the government pension offset, and hopefully give you a little bit better understanding. When Social Security was implemented in 1935, state and local government employees were not allowed to contribute at that point in time. Basically, there were concerns about the legality of federal government imposing taxes on state government. So what this did was it left many state and local government employees who were at that time not members of a retirement system. They didn't have any retirement, they didn't have any disability, and they didn't have any survivor coverage. Pretty much they had nothing. So in 1951, Section 218 basically was allowed to enter into the states were allowed to enter into a voluntary Section 218 agreement. Louisiana, we entered into our agreement effective December 10th, 1952. What this did was it allowed Social Security coverage for state and local government positions, not people, but positions. Sometimes people mistake that, that were not in a retirement system or a plan. Social Security or Medicare only coverage is accomplished by modifying that original agreement. Then we go to 1955. That's when states were allowed to cover positions in a retirement system by holding a majority vote referendum. What that means is in Louisiana, it only requires one vote to be a majority, okay? The only government agencies in Louisiana to cover their employees with both Social Security and retirement plan were New Orleans. It was the city, the housing authority, sewage, and the water board. They are still the only ones that fit in that criteria. In 2004, Louisiana became a named state. What that means, it allowed coverage of retirement system positions by holding a divided vote referendum. What a divided vote referendum is, if participants vote yes, they want it, they get coverage. If they vote no, they don't. So that's how to distinguish between the two. Each state, including Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, has entered into a Section 218 agreement. Each state's enabled legislation determines its degree of coverage under Section 218. So what we do in Louisiana may differ than what they do in Texas, Mississippi, etc. In 2004, Louisiana became a named state. Our statutes had to be amended to enable us to conduct a divided vote referendum. So that way we have the ability to say yes or no on whether they want coverage. I'm going to give you a very basic example of a formula used to calculate a retirement benefit from Social Security. First of all, they have to determine what PIA is, which is the primary insurance amount. This is done by looking at a worker's highest 35 years of earnings. So if you log on to your own Social Security page, if you have one, and you look at the last 35 years, if there are zeros in there, there's no wages reported for that. So they're looking for your highest 35 years. And also they're making adjustments are made for inflation. For a worker who turns 62 in 2004, the first $1,174 of PIA is multiplied by 90%. Earnings between $1,074 and $7,078 or 5904 is by 32%, and the remainder is by 15%. The sum of the three amounts equals the primary insurance amount, PIA, which is then we're going to be either increasing it or decreasing it, depending on when the worker starts their benefits. Are they going to do it before or after full retirement age? So that makes a big determination. And this formula basically produces the monthly payment amount. On the next slide, I've kind of broken it down here so you can see a visual of what I'm talking about. We're going to say in this illustration that this particular worker turned 62 in 2004, their PIA is $8,000. So the first $1,174 is 90%, is $1,056.60. The next $5,904 is 32%, which is $1,889.28. And the remainder is $922 at 15%, is $138.30. So if you sum all of these three factors, it's going to equal $3,084.18. This could, and I use the word could, be the worker's monthly Social Security retirement benefit at full retirement age. I'd like y'all to remember that Social Security benefits are geared toward the low wage earner. Okay, keep in mind that Social Security was implemented to have a small savings toward retirement, disability, and surviving dependent coverage. That's really why it was put into place. All right, moving on to the next slide. Let's talk about WEP. The definition of WEP basically is if you didn't pay Social Security taxes on your government earnings, but you still are eligible for Social Security benefits, the formula used to figure your benefit amount may be modified, giving you a reduced Social Security benefit. Basically, what that means is, let me explain how a public pension or a defined contribution plan account can impact Social Security benefit. Public employees who receive a retirement benefit from work that's not covered by Social Security or contribute to a defined contribution plan in lieu of Social Security, but they are eligible to receive a Social Security benefit based on their own earnings record. So they have worked in the private sector. They do have some Social Security benefit. May be subject to the windfall elimination provision. Since Social Security benefits are geared toward the low wage earner, those who receive a benefit from non-Social Security, covered wages may have their Social Security benefit reduced. Now, because this worker is eligible to receive a pension from wages not covered by Social Security, because of the amount, they're technically not a low wage earner, okay, for Social Security benefits calculation purposes. Therefore, the first factor of the calculation may be reduced from 90% to 40%. The figure can be more if you retire and begin drawing a Social Security benefit prior to retiring from the state. WEP is a reduction and cannot offset in whole a Social Security benefit based on your own earnings record. Let's look at an example so you can understand what I just said. Same thing, same worker, $8,000, turned 62 in 2004. The first 1,174 is now reduced by 40%, not 90, which is 469.60. The next is 5904 at 32%, which is 1889.28. And the remainder is at 15% at 138.30. So the sum of these three factors now equals 2497.18. Therefore, there was a WEP reduction of $587. The reduction can be increased based on COLA at the age of retirement. So it just depends on when you retire and how many COLAs there have been since then. Now, there's always an exception to the rule, and there's always an exception to WEP. Exceptions, basically, it may not be applied if you have 30 years of substantial earning in Social Security covered work. You worked in the private sector for 30 years, you came into the state, you have 30 years of coverage. Or the reduction of the 90% factor can be between 45 and 85%, opposed to the 40% if you have 21 to 29 years of substantial earnings in Social Security covered work. Another exception to the rule could be those employees meeting the criteria of the Louisiana Act of 154. What this states is if an employee had 10 years of service by September the 1st, 1985, they were considered eligible to retire for WEP purposes, okay? And would therefore not have WEP applied to a Social Security retirement benefit based on their own earnings record. We're talking about your own, not somebody else's. If you were eligible to retire under Act 154 and you participated in DROP, Social Security should not apply WEP. If it happens, you need to call me so I could look into it and find out what happened, because it should not, they should not take that out. All right. Talk about GPO now. The government pension offset, basically state employees who receive a retirement benefit from work not covered by Social Security, but you are eligible to receive a Social Security benefit based on the earnings record of a spouse. You worked in state, your spouse worked in private industry. You're going to look at having, you could be subject to the government pension offset or GPO. Remember, WEP is a reduction only, and GPO can actually offset your spousal benefit entirely. It can actually go away. Here is an example of what I'm talking about. Say we have a woman who worked and earned her own Social Security monthly benefits, but she gets $1,500 based on her own records. Remember, it's the offset is dollar for dollar. Okay. So if her retirement benefits from earnings on her own record is $1,500, but she's eligible to receive a spousal benefit of $1,300, she wouldn't get the spousal benefit at all because her Social Security retirement benefit, $1,500, is more than the spousal benefit. So it basically wipes it out. Remember, dollar for dollar. Now, to calculate the GPO offset, for those of y'all that earn a retirement benefit from wages that are not covered by Social Security, such as state and local employees, the offset is not dollar for dollar, okay? A spousal Social Security benefit would only be reduced by 2/3 of their government pension. When contributions are made to a defined contribution plan in lieu of Social Security will use the account balance figure to figure your monthly benefit, then reduce your spousal benefit by 2/3 of that amount. That's only going to occur when you retire. So when you get to that point, that's when they're going to determine what that 2/3 amount may be. For example, Social Security takes the defined contribution plan balance and determines an $1,800 monthly benefit. The retiree would have their Social Security spousal benefit reduced by 2/3 of their monthly benefit amount, which is $1,200. So you were eligible to receive a $1,300 spousal benefit, but that would be reduced by $1,200. So basically you're eligible to receive $100. While it seems unfair to most state employees who are affected by GPO, if both retirement benefits were earned by Social Security covered wages, this retiree would not be eligible for any spousal benefit because of the dollar to dollar offset, right? Now, GPO also has exceptions. It may not be applied if the public pension you receive is not from wages you earn, okay? It's not from you. Or if you worked in a state or local government position or you contributed to Social Security, because there are those occasions. Again, Act 154 does not apply to GPO, only the WEP. Now, I went and tried to see what the current legislation is going on, and this is the most current legislation that's out there. HR 5342, the Equal Treatment of Public Servants Act of 2023. This bill phases in a new funding formula for determining benefit amount under the windfall elimination WEP. The WEP reduces Social Security retirement and disability benefits for those who receive pensions for certain non-covered employment. There are 37 co-sponsors on this bill, and the last action was actually September of 2023 when it was referred to the Ways and Means Committee, where all weapons GPO basically go to die. They just never make it past there because dollars and cents. That's really what we're talking about. So, a resource if you ever need information to talk directly to Social Security or the Internal Revenue Service. I've provided some phone numbers here. You are more than welcome to call me at any point in time with any question that you may have regarding WEP, GPO, or anything that the Treasury Department, this department oversees. And I will be glad to get back with you and answer the questions in a timely manner. But I really appreciate you all having me here this morning to talk about Social Security benefits, WEP and GPO. And I hope this was a little bit more enlightening, that it may be trying to read statutes on what's going on with this. But anyway, if you have any immediate questions that I could answer based on this, yes, ma'am.
So I'm gonna send it in an email, but I want to go on record because I want a
Sure.
better understanding.
Okay, that's fine.
So the ORP participants have the defined contribution plan. They don't have Social Security.
Correct.
So the law states pension, I get that, but the way it's currently being interpreted, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the state of Louisiana chooses not to participate. So the employee has no choice. And the state of Louisiana could choose not to give an ORP participant any funding just the ORP participant could fund that retirement account. And that would be the only retirement they have. Am I correct in that understanding?
I'm going to ask Angie, who I brought with me with the prior director. She can answer that question for you right now.
Okay, so basically, Louisiana does not decide not to participate in Social Security. We did enter into a voluntary 218 agreement, December 10th of 1952, to cover our non-retirement system positions for Social Security. We did not elect to cover retirement system positions for Social Security. So it's not that we opted out of it. We didn't have a choice at first. So when we were given an opportunity, we covered non-retirement system positions. You are correct. That is going to be their only retirement benefit. The state is not mandated to do an employer contribution to any type of defined contribution plan. It's that way due to IRS regulations. They mandate, in order to be a FICA qualifying plan, there has to be at least a 7.5% contribution rate in order for that to replace Social Security. So that 7.5% can come on the employer's part, the employee's part, or a combination of the two. They don't care how you get to 7.5%. So the fact that the employer isn't contributing to that, I would say that is the state's decision not to do that. But
So the state forces the ORP participant to do the 8%. So in theory, the
Okay.
state could say no.
I'm verbiage.
Yep.
It's all about verbiage. The state doesn't force anyone to go into ORP.
True.
That is an
But if they
elective
select- But
decision.
if they select it, that's their only choice. They don't get any kind of other.
Yes, and hopefully, before they make that decision, they are highly educated on the opportunities available to them should they select that. I mean, you want them to know what they're getting into. So hopefully going into it, they're aware the state's not going to contribute. All you're getting is going to be based on your own contributions.
Yeah.
But it
I think the
is,
employees need to be educated that truly they could end up with no one contributing but themselves.
that's absolutely correct. And I'm all about education for that and about weapon GPO and how it could impact them. It's.
Yeah.
If they're moving state to state, and I do understand the premise for ORP is that it's movable. It's transferable from state to state.
It is, but
You
every
have
other
teachers that are
state-
moving.
They get to participate in Social Security.
Yes,
Big difference.
many other states, not everyone. I can promise you there's some they'll go to and they can. But for the most part, you're correct.
Yeah.
There are many other states where they would also have Social Security contributions. They make at that point. So, I mean, at this point, the way things stand now, you have an opportunity, you're looking at it, you can see that number one, we need to make sure that they're very well aware of what they're getting into when they come in. Are we going to make changes to it? Which is what all of you get to decide and, you know, suggest. So, but yes, it isn't, it's not that they don't have a choice. They do. So, I'm probably going to step on Sylvia's toes here, but since we're talking about that, the Social Security Administration has formed SSA 1945. And they have recently sent a letter to all of the governors of all states, asking them to make sure that that form is being distributed to employees. And what that is it's the form that says, if you take this position and you're in a position where you're not paying into Social Security, your Social Security benefit could be impacted by that. So in Louisiana, we distributed this years and years and years ago to the retirement systems. It's become part of, for state employees, their hiring packet in most instances. But while we have all of you here, if you could just kind of check with your people and make sure that it's an informational tool for them to know that weapon GPO may impact a social security benefit that they earn.
Yeah, I have people that decline offers due to it. So,
Really?
yes.
Well, I'm glad they're reading
I mean,
it.
I would have probably declined the offer 28 years ago.
Yes, no, I'm glad they're reading it. That's actually great to know. I didn't coming into state service. They gave me a whole packet of stuff to fill out and I was
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna get a job with the state, get a job with the state.
Yep.
And I just signed everything and I
Well,
like,
back then, I don't think anybody was given those documents.
I was,
I
I
was.
was in the nineties, in the latter nineties when I started with the state, so.
Yeah, may I add to this real quick?
I'm sorry, Dr. Garza.
Oh, yes, yes, ma'am.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
For
I'm
the
Angie
record.
Dowdy. I am the Social Security Program Analyst now. I'm the one that recently retired quickly to go be mama.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. My quick comment was first, and I apologize, there was a car on fire on I-12, so it took me a while to slide in this side door over here. Did I misunderstand? Because I thought all of our non-classified faculty, which I am, of course, even though if you were in the TRSL, they don't contribute to Social Security either.
No.
So we're not just talking about the defined people. That was my point. is
Yeah.
I want to make everybody to know
Yeah.
that.
Louisiana only covered the non-retirement system positions.
Correct,
Yes.
correct, and I'm 19 years in Southeastern, so that's a base statement. So yeah, it's semantics to say they didn't opt out. The semantics are they chose not to include. That's the semantics. But we were told, in a brief moment of time when you get your HR packet, that we collectively in higher education, the state of Louisiana does not contribute to Social Security. So if you would like to take a monthly personal contribution, you can do that, but across the board, we do not. So that is how HR handles it. And, whether or not the individual employee to be hired could be like, here's the actual brick and mortar facts, more details. But we are told straight up, it doesn't matter which contribution plan you chose, we're still not going to be contributing because we're the state of
Yes.
Louisiana.
Yes. That's correct.
Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment. My name is Joey David. I'm the staff analyst with the House Committee on Retirement. Another piece of legislation that's currently in Congress right now is HR 82. That is authored by Congressman Graves. It has about 330 co-sponsors. The last action, it was moved out of the House Committee on Ways and Means. House Majority Leader Scalise said in an interview that he expects to call a vote on the floor sometime in November. So that is something that we at the House are monitoring. But it still has to make it through the Senate and eventually onto the president's desk before January 2nd when the new Congress takes over. So that is another piece of legislation that we're watching.
Is that federal legislation?
Yes.
Okay, well, and I will tell you that if you go to uscongress.gov and you do a search for weapon GPO, that doesn't come up as a piece of legislation.
It's titled as the Social Security Fairness Act, and we're completely get rid of.
It showed all the other Social Security Fairness Acts. I was actually looking for that one.
Mhm.
And it's not showing up there. I'm like, where did it go? Why is it not there? So, no, I'm just telling you,
Yeah.
let them know that when people are looking for it, all of a sudden you can't find it. No, it's not showing up.
It comes
Yeah.
up, if you Google it, it might not come up via the route that was suggested, but if you Google it, it'll take you straight to it.
Okay, yeah. I'm glad to know that it didn't just disappear. I was
No,
worried.
it's still there.
Yeah, yeah, good job. No, I really was.
Yeah, we were looking for it yesterday.
I just want to clarify one point on what Gina said, that under current state law, the state is required to contribute to the ORP. That could change, but currently they are required to contribute the 6.2.
Is there conversation of them not wanting to contribute the 6.2?
Not that I've heard, but while it's possible that it would still be a qualified replacement plan without it, under current law, they are required to contribute.
Yeah, because it had dropped below that and
Right.
for many years. And so then people started hearing about it and then legislation came about to get the 6.2. 2.
Yeah.
That's the
Right,
minimum
yeah, I remember that. It went down to like 5.7.
for several years.
Yes.
That was, Trey, that was in 2012, 2013, that law was passed to set the 6.2 as the,
I think it was phased in
Yeah.
for higher ed and for
Yeah.
K-12, it went in.
And the 6.2 is the minimum, but we actually can contribute more, but you have to the retirement system know a year in advance that your institution would like to contribute more than the 6.2.
Do you know how many institutions have ever done that?
Zero. Because who has the budget for it?
Yeah, sure.
so that mechanism, Chantel, as you mentioned, that already exists in law too. So, okay. Got it. Anyone else for Social Security, GPO, and WEP? All right, well, Sylvia, thank you for coming,
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
and thank you for bringing. a
Oh, I had to
phone
bring
friend
back
over there.
up. I had to bring back up. She's the walking encyclopedia. She knows everything. I'm trying to.
Thank you for coming.
That's retirement. The brain is going. I can do general math and colors. Thanks, y'all.
All right, thank you.
much.
Appreciate it.
All right, we'll move on. The next agenda item we have, so as part of this task force, we have to submit a final report with recommendations to the legislature 60 days before the beginning of session. So that puts us at, I believe it's January 10th is that date. 90 days, I'm sorry, 90, okay, good to know, yeah.
All of our other task forces are 60.
I can't keep track of them. So in order to do that, that's why we have our last meeting date is December 18th, so we can finalize that and get it all done. But as we start to think about this final report, I wanted to hear from the group on any consideration of report recommendations that we can kind of research, explore. And then I know that's another agenda item, but we'd have a November meeting to really confirm those and then have that be a part of the final report. So at this point, I want to open up to the group for just any recommendation, considerations, and things we'd want to do. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, but I just want to make sure it's still on the table. There probably are a number of very good recommendations we should put forth. I think one of them ideally would be to allow for a 7-year window instead of 5. It would need to be for all employees to be equitable, but it would benefit most the tenure track faculty. And the ideal number would be 7, not 6, because that tenure decision coming in the 6th, it might be too tight for them to decide which way to switch until the 7th year if they wanted to switch.
Okay. And that would be just, so we can have it on the record, building off of the new law that was passed this past year, they're giving it a 5-year window. The proposed recommendation would be to bring it up to 7.
For both sides.
Yeah.
And I think that the new legislation was to match the option that already exists for the people that pick the defined benefit option to switch, which has been in place, but so that the ORP folks could do the same.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Was to match.
Okay.
I do want to point out, if we did make that recommendation, that would probably have a slight cost to the system. And, I assume Kenny would put an actuarial note out there that says it has a cost.
I can add a little bit. I understand why we're talking about the 7. But in reality, if I'm an employee, which I am tenured, so when I come and I have my 3.5 year mid, maybe three's full, so 3.5 mid, and then your 6 is your tenure. I've already been in the system, so the 5 is a shady window, but it may be a realistic window, still acceptable window, because I would have already been an employee. to need to then change. So if it's 5 years from date of employment, then that's a problem, right?
That's
It's
what I
five,
think it is.
yes, but if it's 5 years from when I agreed, which for us at Southeastern, and might be for the whole system, is only 60 days. So 60 days is negligible, right? So if it's 5 years of date of employment, then yes, it doesn't include those that are tenured and they want to stay. So the intention of why we have the high demand faculty that we're trying to keep in the state of Louisiana, not purge our talent that we don't want to purge are the tenured talent. So this 7-year window would make sense. It's not as desirable for those individuals that are not tenured. They probably, if they stay, they're already probably on TSL. I just say it.
Oh, yeah, I would agree. It would benefit, I'm just thinking it would be equitable to do it for all, but.
Oh, yeah,
but it-
definitely.
It would benefit really only the tenured faculty or the
Yes.
tenure earning faculty that are doing well, but you never know what can happen even in that last 3 years post mid-tenure review.
Right, so.
And there may be a cost, and I don't know if the cost benefit ratio would work out or not, but the possibly non-monetized cost would be how many people are we, scaring off because of that?
And our numbers would look like about a third.
So can I come back to you on that cost point? I'm pretty sure, like, and I was informed by Chantel earlier that probably this was discussed when this act was being formulated already, like whether we should do 5 years or 6 years or 7 years,
Yes.
and the cost was analyzed. So how costly it is going to be?
So I don't think that the actuaries can put an actual dollar amount on it. If you remember when Kenny gave his presentation a couple of meetings ago, just the more opportunities, options you give people to make a choice, it just has an incremental cost increase. So I think if you did a note, it wouldn't have a dollar amount. It would just say, would basically explain what he did in his presentation, is that you're offering a little more option and a little more window. So it would have a cost. But it would probably be very small.
And just, I'm sorry, just to circle back up, the whole reason of the, passing this legislation was to maintain our talent. Our talent are the tenure track line, and our talent is the ones that were tenured and are here to stay. That's the intention of, that was the intention of the whole conversation to start with. Then it should be made streamlined to make it actually, realistic to apply.
I would agree 100%. My conversations I had with some of the folks involved in the initial legislation is first steps first. And this was getting to parity. But now that we're at parity, the next logical step, we don't want to go crazy, not for 30 years, but the next logical step would be to get to the point that would help us to retain the tenure track faculty.
And if people are doing, very well, they can request early tenure review. So they can, I mean, they've locked stats, millions of dollars of grants and stuff. They can request early tenure, and they can request early, promotion. So it's not everybody stuck in that same 6-year window.
But we all don't want to, well, I don't want to keep just the cream of the crop. I want to keep the really good working folks too that are not necessarily going to win an award, but they're doing a great job, and there's costs involved every time someone leaves and someone has to be replaced, not just in dollars to hire, but in, departments having to rethink things and make new plans.
And not to belabor the point, but there's also the case of some off-cycle hires that start in the spring semester.
Yeah.
And so normally, the vast majority of hires start in the fall semester. So now would be the time when they would be starting to prepare their tenure application, and the decision won't actually be heard by, it won't be official until August.
Right.
Actually, next year, when it's for the UL system. And so this is, this goes past the 6th year. And also, but for those who are hired in the spring semester, in effect, they had, they go with the next year. So that's adds another half a year, actually, in calendar terms, probably another 8 months. And so that would be another argument to kind of go with 7 so that, you can catch them, given how late the official decision by, in particular, the UL system. I know LSU was doing it earlier. It is making these decisions. And there probably is some cost, but at the same time, it's, when it comes to sort of fairness, it's about balancing the risk. Yes, do we want to offload this risk on the individual, or can the state absorb some of that risk, given that, it's trying to retain faculty?
Let me throw a wrench in this real quick and see if I can. If there's a concern of trade from the system standpoint of a potential cost, if the field was narrowed down to just reflect tenure track there. But I know that gets into different classes of employees, and so I don't know how that would work.
I think the cost is gonna be very small. I don't know how our board would vote. I just wanted to point out that there would be a cost, and for them to implement this would take a 2/3 vote, because I'm sure Kenny will put the cost on it. No one's gonna know the cost. It'll basically be the system's experience may change a little, and so at some point, our experience will not match our assumptions, and eventually the employer rate may go up slightly, or it might not go up at all, given we look at our assumptions every year. Some assumptions are wrong and it makes the rate go down, some make it go up. So we would never really see what the cost was. It's just, I assume Kenny's gonna put a cost on it.
But there's some logic in your point. If the first step was parity at 5 years and the next step is not quite attainable, if it's for everyone today, then maybe the next step is just for the tenure earning track faculty, small step. And then in a future discussion, everybody might achieve parity again.
I think that's gonna be very confusing to the employees. It's probably better to have it the same for everybody.
Oh, I agree, as long as the votes are there.
It'd be very difficult for us and for the HR community, I'm sure, explaining the differences, and it's already hard to explain the differences in different plans, and to have different windows for different groups. I think it would cause more problems than it's worth to.
What do we call that? A pilot when we want to narrow down the scope? It's called a pilot program, in other words.
So I think if we vote on a recommendation, I would abstain from this one, but my suggestion would be if we're going to recommend it, that it would be change the 5 to the 7, not break it up into different groups.
We got one. All right. Anybody else?
So I don't know if this fits in here or not, but time and time again, I keep hearing from ORP participants, and there's no representation for ORP participants. Where's their recourse? Who's representing them, right? So like when the benefit had fallen below the 6.2% that would have been equal to Social Security, it took years to get legislation, and they had to call their legislators. So who looks out for the ORP participant? So for example, TRSL has a board. That board looks out for TRSL members, but there's not a single seat on there representing ORP. So like, who represents the group as a whole to protect them? Who's their protector?
So I will say that you're correct. They are members of the ORP are not, or participants in the ORP are not members of the system, so they do not get to vote on board members for TRSL. One issue, if ORP people were to have a board participant, that person would be a fiduciary to the defined benefit plan, and they'd be taking on a liability of being a fiduciary to a plan that they're not in, and they're not going to get any benefit. I don't know that you'd really have anybody that want to take on that responsibility. You might,
So how do we get that kind of representation?
so from our board's standpoint, our job is to basically pick the vendors. We have an ORP consultant that monitors the vendors, reports to our board every month. Our meetings are public, so any ORP participant can come with, ORP we do quarterly. So anybody that is ORP participant or not can come to our meetings. Our meetings are public. And we do have consultants that monitor, they monitor the cost of the, I guess, the share class for the fees on each of the investments. They monitor performance and they report that to our board every quarter. So the board is looking out for the ORP members in that we have hired outside people to monitor providers.
Okay, so a TRSL participant elects a board member. That board member is their representative. An ORP participant elects nobody, but somebody's making decisions for them. So they truly have no representation.
Doesn't the ORP option still fall under TRSL?
That's
So shouldn't there be some representation even though this has been subcontracted out?
like I said, if ORP participants were to have a member on the board, they'd have to have somebody that's willing to take on a role of a fiduciary for the $27 billion DB plan. Really, the board's responsibility, or under statute, what we do is we select the vendors. Every 5 years, we go through a process. Usually it's an SFP, and we solicit bids. It's generally the same 3 vendors are the ones that submit, and then vendor selects what options they want to provide to the ORP participants. Our consultant then monitors. So that's kind of the process. Catherine, did you have
Yeah, I
anything
mean, I
to
think you
add?
covered it. Just kind of add, Catherine Whitney, I'm the director of TRSL. What fiduciary responsibility means and what it comes with as fiduciaries is you have personal liability. So it is quite a standard that someone that's not a member of the defined benefit plan may not want to take on from that perspective. But that's, I think Trey captured. Another thing our consultant does is look at what's going on in industry trends, best in class. So it's more than just that monitoring piece. You know, they're looking at what's going on around the country and making certain recommendations. And again, our board is seeing those reports quarterly.
But again, the TRSL board selects the vendors. ORP participants are nowhere in that process.
So there
That's
could be
correct.
an investment subcommittee that is made up of ORP participants that then sends recommendations to the board that maybe I know at LSU, we have a 403B investment committee and we have finance professors that actually sit on that committee. The HRO sits on it and we look at the investments and how they're performing. We look at the MMPs, we do the RFPs for that. So why couldn't there be something similar on the ORP plan?
Advisory committee is what you're recommending.
I think that would be a great idea. So, so I just want to follow up with a couple of questions. So is this a general practice amongst various states that wherever we have defined benefits system and defined contribution system, the general idea is that those who are in defined contribution systems have very little.
Every state is set up differently. So we modeled ours after Georgia, and that's the way Georgia did it. There are some ORPs that are run by each higher ed institution or by a state higher ed board. So there's lots of different ways that it's done. I know we are not alone in the way that we do it, but I don't know what percentage of plans have it the same way that we do. But I do know that in some states, higher ed runs their ORP and it's separate and distinct from any state or teacher retirement system.
So again, like following up on what Chantal said, if 403B can have such a, I didn't knew it had such an advisory committee or something. I think it will really mitigate many concerns that if ORP can also have some advisory role with these consultants. Because in the last meeting, it was pretty clear that even though like we have these three vendors, some of them are really good. But even those were like, even like TIA, which has probably the best practices and so on, and best ranking, even they have certain funds which have a lot of tracking error. And I don't know like why there is this tracking error. Maybe the consultant could have done more research into like what, maybe like we could have got Vanguard funds or something, or they are not allowed for that, I know that. But like some other kind of funds probably could have been chosen instead of those funds. So certainly, I trust like consultants do a great job, but any external input or advisory input may still be beneficial to everyone. The second thing is that you mentioned about the vendors, and I would like to request that point as a separate recommendation if possible. I know there is a legislation, we cannot have more than 3 vendors. But probably we should, and again, like if we have just 3 vendors and Corebridge, ING, and TIA have been vendors for decades, it gives a lot of inertia to any other vendor to step in. They know like they are culturally there, we may not get in and so on. So is it possible that when in 2025, the new vendors are going to be called for, can TRSL board encourage other vendors, which are not right now part of the list, that why don't you go ahead and submit the bids?
So,
Or how does it work? I don't know.
So we put out the SFP and anyone who wants to bid is allowed. One of the issues that we run into is we require the provider to be a fiduciary. There are certain vendors out there who don't want to take on that responsibility or liability. 3 vendors that we have are agreeable to that. That's in their contract with us is we provide that they agree that they are fiduciaries to the ORP members. And there are certain vendors that do not submit because they would not agree to it. So even if we change the law to provide that we can have more than 3 vendors, that's not a guarantee that we will. It would depend on who submits and what those bids look like. And I will say that in some places, the trend is to reduce the number of vendors. So while the recommendation could be made, it would require a change in the law, and then it would require that there be providers who submit.
So I'm not sure whether you can share these details, but again, like when we were looking at those lists in the last meeting where we have fewer vendors, one vendor which comes for is Fidelity many times, out of 2. Fidelity was always there. It gives the lowest cost index funds in the market today. So is it possible that like they would have refused because the
Fidelity has not submitted in the past.
Okay, but they are our 403B providers, at least in some systems.
And I don't know if they have that fiduciary responsibility for the 403B plan. But we require it as a system. If we're hiring you as the provider, you are going to be a fiduciary to our participants.
So just so, because we kind of went all over here. So Gina, your recommendation would be, as we talk through this, I guess the creation of an advisory board or an advisory committee to assist with or participate with the investment committee for
Right,
TRSL.
someone that would represent, and it would have to be ORP, just like ORP members can't ever represent on the TRSL board, it should be ORP members representing.
Yes, how would you see that work?
Okay.
If ORP participants got together and created an advisory group, would be part of TRSL, or would it be this group would show up at our meetings every quarter and participate in the TRSL?
I haven't thought of this, all those details, but definitely somebody to represent on how these vendors are selected and be part of that process.
I can add, I completely understand what you're talking about the chaos that could unfold. I understand that. As a past Senate, and we're gonna say I'm past faculty Senate president for 5 years, and I've been on campus since 2006, started in the Senate in 2008. Right, and then we started with the dropping in the numbers and all of that. I think it's more of the optics, because in reality, they may not have a lot of impact. What you're saying, an advisory board, keep this, but optics wise, in lines of open communication, it would be tremendous. Whether or not they have true, genuine
opposed to
power
this.
to impact is a
What-
completely
what is this?
different conversation.
But optics are important.
The optics are great, would be very.
And the voice at the table, that ORP members have no voice.
We contribute into the same pot of money, but there's no voice and no.
Well, it's not the same pot of money.
But you understand what we're,
Right.
that's the,
No, I
that's
understand what you're
the
saying.
optics from the other side.
The same
of the
administrative structure.
Yes.
I
So
think
can
Tri's
I,
point is just maybe something that has to be clearly defined, because I guess what comes to mind is, are your finance professors gonna be investment professionals? And how much in the investment portion would you want this task force, or this advisory committee? I mean, those are the types of things that we really need to think through, because as we keep bringing up this fiduciary responsibility, these are people's retirements. So we need to be sure that those individuals that are making advice, particularly on the investment vehicle options, do have the appropriate training and credentials to be able to do that. So it's really, I think that clearly defining the role would be important.
Well, the role could even be narrowed maybe to exclusively advisory on legislative issues that affect retirement, rather than on investment advice.
I think, let me try to add all of these points. So, thank you, Erin, so much for the bringing in the faculty senate consideration. So we have a group of the whole state, which Phil and I regularly go to, like to Alexandria, like every few months, which is the Association of Louisiana Faculty Senates. It's a voluntary group. What probably we can try to do is to have some sort of representation from each senate of each system. Let us say, like, we find one ORP participant who might be interested voluntarily to voice concerns. I fully agree. I don't think like we can have fiduciary responsibility about it. Even if like somebody is the best finance professor in the country, should probably not do that. So I think the idea can just be that we find these concerns and just a voice, like a 10-minute voice or a 5-minute voice, or just the ability to sit in the meetings to listen to the board.
Well, and you can do that now. And, like you mentioned, one of the investments had a high tracking error, and you think that should be looked into. Anybody's welcome to come to our board meeting. We have public comment during the our investment committee. Someone could say that and ask the board, look, can you have your consultant look into that? I'm sure our board would not have any problem doing so. Nobody does it, nobody comes, but it's something people could do now.
I would like to know, what is it I've not been to one of these meetings as a person. So I don't know what happened.
You should take time to go.
But what is it that's happening at these meetings that would benefit, what is happening at these meetings that would make Dr. Porzelski state that she's aware of the chaos that would ensue if there were a presence of people or a person
I
representing
don't think
ORP?
I don't think it's a presence of the people. I think it's how, if there is some official committee, how that's set up and how you select people and what their role is. If everyone in this room wanted to come to our board meeting and make comments to our board on one of the quarters where we're discussing ORP, that's possible. And
So you do have quarters where you're discussing ORP,
we do,
but there's nobody there to represent ORP. So what are you really discussing? I'm just wondering.
So-
Yeah.
So for instance, I think this quarter, we have our ORP consultant coming in.
Mhm.
They present a report to the board
Okay,
on all the investment options, which ones are doing well, which ones are having problems. If there's an investment that's not doing well or has a poor track record,
Mhm.
they may recommend that the board put that on a watch list,
Mhm.
which is basically that needs to be monitored and potentially removed as an option and replaced with something better.
And so those persons who make that choice, that's the TSRL board, and they do have the fiduciary responsibility to make the best choice. what
And they're
you're saying.
selected by TRSL members, not ORP members.
And is that they do have that, and these are the people who are the experts that can make such a decision that would be in our best interest, we ORP people.
So
We just
the
wondering.
consultant is our expert that our
Oh,
board
okay.
hires.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm just suggesting based on what I'm hearing about optics and the concern of having there is something to be said about a group of people who have a targeted reason to be in a space for advocacy, for questions, for whatever. I just think even if it's just at that
But
quarterly.
if there's a group like the
Mhm.
Senate group, and they want us to send them notices of our meetings, so they'll know, okay, ORP's
Mhm.
coming up, and we want to send somebody, we can do that and they can show up.
I think that will be a great idea. Let me give you an example. I fully agree, like we have faculty senate meetings. And everyone is welcome to make public comments, but no one shows up
Yeah.
generally, right? But on the other hand, I'll give another example. We have Board of Supervisor meetings of the Louisiana State LSU system. Obviously, everyone can come and give public comments, even faculty. They don't do it. However, board allows, like the faculty senate president or the, what is it called? Council of Faculty Advisors chair, which is one of the faculty senate presidents of the systems, and similarly staff presidents, to make a report. It's a 10-minute report. And that is a very powerful voice. It's still like board can take that power off any day they want, but the formalization of the process means a lot to the faculty and the staff, that there is we are heard. I think if something like that can be done, that there is an advisory committee, which you can give us the task, okay, you have to go and form from the ORP participants. You can have these 5 or 6 representatives, which become your channel to give the information to the ORP providers. I think that will really help the optics.
I would say too, that it's, part of it is a communication issue, that ORP members are the redheaded stepchildren of the retirement systems. We don't get newsletters like lasers people get. We don't get newsletters like TRSL people get. We don't know that there are opportunities to speak because our retirement portfolios exist in that vacuum. We can reach out to whichever vendor we're working with, but as far as being part of an ORP group, we are not represented in that way. So I think looking at communication as a two-way street, it's not just knowing that we have a body that's representing our voices and advocating, but also getting some information from that advocacy back to the members would be very helpful.
I would agree with what my colleague said. I'm gonna try not to repeat what they said. So I hear your concerns, and actually I hear them as more reasons to actually have representation. And so I would actually object to the word optics. I think there's actually substance. It's very different when you have a group of people who have committed to represent, and this sort of a version of what my colleagues already said. So if I've taken on the responsibility, this is, I guess, a public meeting, or somebody can join, but I've taken on the responsibility to be on this task force. So I will drive and I will be here and I'll be present. So I think that speaks to the need for people to do this and to take time to represent. What is the most productive form of representation is something we can discuss. The second word that keeps coming up in most of your sentences is the word consultants. And so when we think about accountability, we usually don't associate that with consultants. And so we do understand that you're doing your best, but it's still, your main charge is the teachers' retirement systems, and you kind of a little bit of an arm's length here, and so I would feel much better if there's somebody else there at the meetings, or at least the relevant meetings, who, with skin in the game. And again, this is not saying anything against the work that you're doing. I think it will help you actually, I think, this is not, this can be a productive relationship. But to my mind, somebody has to watch the consultants. Also, I was kind of scared by the comment that, my finance colleagues can't understand the investment, potentially would not be able to understand.
More of a comment of that they don't want to become investment advisors. Because
They
then
don't want to
can't
become
go-
investment advisors, but they should certainly be able to understand that. And so hopefully, there's no black magic in all this, in all the investment decisions that are being made. So it should be clear how things are happening.
But let me give an example of some complaints that we had. So I don't know when the date is, but in the next year or two, we are going to do our next SFP for the vendors. I don't think our board would have any problem, and then they would welcome if, so when we start the process, we put out a timeline. Say, look, this is when the board's gonna review the SFP, this is when the board's gonna approve the SFP, this is when the responses are due, this is when the board's going to meet to select the vendors. If ORP participants want to be involved at any step in that process, they can, and it'd probably be helpful if we heard from ORP members. If someone looked at the SFP and said, well, I suggest these changes, or if the responses come in and someone wanted to see them, once we receive them, they're public record. And we receive them, and I don't know how long, but usually we receive them, and then the next month we review them in the board meeting. An ORP member could request, send me these documents when they come in because they're public, and you could look at them and come to the board meeting and say, look, I don't like what this vendor is saying. I don't like, and if you had a group to look at it, the group could present to our board, look, these are our concerns. And our board wouldn't have a problem with that. I think just coming up with the structure or how it will work or who would be involved is the real question. It'd probably it'd be more impactful coming from a group than one person showing up themselves. Like, I'm Trey, I'm in the ORP, and these are my thoughts.
It's actually more impactful to set in writing that there is a group, an advisory group that gives recommendations to the board on the behalf of the ORP membership. And it's voted on just like the teachers and members are voted on. So I think it's kind of got watered down, but I really would prefer to see like a true structure that participates in this to represent all ORP participants.
It would be substance, but it would also be optics, because again, coming from the communication perspective, no matter how great a job you're doing or any group, if there's no optics that go with it, then the substance is overlooked and people presume that things are not running well.
And I would think the structure of the board would be 2 or 3 elected participants of ORP, member of teachers retirement, and then your consultants would work together and they would make recommendations to the teachers board for final approval.
Big steps up.
So, Gina, that would be would that be for the vendor piece of it, or just actually overall? Like, because I think we're going a little different here.
Or just the ORP representation in collective. Because that was her, I mean, I'm sorry, Gina, I just stepped on you, but the whole point is the bigger picture, not just vendor selection.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to think at the end of the day, the most educated person in the front of the room should probably has our benefit at doubt, our best benefit, our benefits for us the most. So there would be that, I would never want to get in that conversation, and I agree with you. We don't want a bunch of individuals, we're stronger as a committee, as a voice. But it would be more of a whole and a representation of it in its entirety of ORP. What does that really matter? Legislative, right? Changes, knowledge, information coming down the pipeline. Hey, in 18 months, these things may actually kind of start to be a problem or a benefit or a negative. That's the communication lines that we don't, and over the years, haven't found out that those talks were in conversation until after the fact. No newsletter, like you've been saying, and so forth. So the bigger picture of, we won't get that shell shock of the massive changes, because many of us have been around so long. We've seen the years of being just walked on.
So perhaps we should just drill down a little bit deeper and address issues of financial literacy or the lack thereof. And I think that's been a huge part of the issue. And my recommendation is that we have some sort of financial literacy, financial awareness, whatever you want to call it, be it virtual or in person, but just plain and simple language that any layman can understand, because it has a culture attached to it. And there are certain languages and words and terms that are used that many people won't understand. So that's one recommendation for education and training. And my other would be, I'm not sure how to assess this or even monitor it, but on the ORP side, there has to be good faith, transparency, openness, clear language. I don't know how to monitor that, but it's needed. Especially as we talk about recruiting those junior faculty into institutions of higher education who may or may not be aware, may not have a background in financial literacy as they plan for their futures. They should be able to make informed decisions.
Would it be possible, and I hate the number of trainings we are required to do every year already. I'd like to see a couple of them swapped out to every other year. But that being said, would it be possible to have the kind of training you're suggesting be kind of part of the employment start for new faculty and staff?
Absolutely.
It would be great help.
We asked them what kind of education is available through the vendors.
Maybe even before they're
No.
allowed to make the decision.
No,
Not the vendor necessarily.
In 60 days.
When a person is just starting in higher education, just say you're, I don't know, 24 and just starting like someone I know very well. And someone comes to you and says that you have this opportunity to take your money with you, your retirement. You're 24, 25, not married, no kids, freewheeling, doing all kinds of things. You're not thinking about the future. There should be in my opinion, we, the grown people of the room, we're long past 24, we have a responsibility to make sure that they know what they are doing. And I do not think that has been happening historically. It is just like the woman said that was here earlier, I got a job at the state of Louisiana, let me sign this paper. We need to find a way to make sure that persons coming in, regardless of age, but especially if they are young and starting out, understand the impact of their signature. And I don't think that we've taken that responsibility on. That's my statement.
And can I add to that? It would be, to just give my backstory, I started in higher education. I moved over to the state side. I brought my ORP with me and I kept it, which I was able to do. A lot of people are not able to do that coming into state service. The ORP is not the option, but I was able to do it. No one ever at any point in that journey gave me any time to consider. They pushed a paper in front of me and said, you have to sign, you have to check this box and sign this paper. Which one do you want, A or B? I did not have the opportunity to think about it. I didn't have the opportunity to do a whole lot of research. Admittedly, I've been at Regents for 23 years. So I was in the young and not really thoughtful category when I came in. But it would be very helpful if there was a window a month, 60 days, something to say, you have this amount of time to make this decision.
Yeah.
On your own behalf, this decision is on your own behalf. And here, you can take some trainings, you can take some, you can join
should be
information
available.
sessions
Maybe
and
even
get
a
the
required
opportunity.
training.
Absolutely.
I think the important word that keeps popping up when we talk about ORP and making that decision is the word irrevocable. Because of that, this should be taken more seriously. That's how I feel. Once that decision is made, you know, we got this moment where we're doing this, but who knew this was gonna come to make such a decision? And if you're, 20, 30 years in, it doesn't, for some people it doesn't matter, but the concept of irrevocable is significant. So we need to do a bit more.
Currently have 60 days to opt in and get all of the employee and employer contributions. After that, you still got up until you have 5 years of service credit to opt to go into the
Right,
ORP.
like that just recently changed. We didn't have that.
No, for one side, not the other. It's always been that way,
Always
the other
had
side.
5 years to go into the
Teachers,
ORP.
yeah,
Uh,
right. But
You
the
may get less
TRSL.
contributions at that point, because you're only gonna get your contributions, but you do have up until you have 5 years of service to choose to go into the ORP.
That just changed this
Okay.
year.
No,
Well-
it changed the other way. ORP to go, or if you choose ORP, it's new that you can go back into the DB, but you always had the opportunity.
You always had the opportunity to join teachers and then make the ORP decision 5 years out.
Yeah.
But once you chose the ORP, just recently, you can now, in the 5 years, choose TRSL. That's been something that we've been working to want to get to.
I think we've got 3 great suggestions on the table. I don't think that one canceled another one out. The fact that we're maybe suggesting to move that to 7 would help with the tenured faculty. The substance and optics of a advisory committee, I think would help a lot. I've heard so many people in my 22 years on the ORP side manufacture fiction about TRSL and what you guys are doing, and having an advisory board would help with that. But to start with the training would put everybody in like a better position to make that initial decision and still have the flexibility 5 or 7 years down the road to maybe change that. I wouldn't do it coming in myself, even though I was older, because I thought I might be moving again. But you still have the option.
I would like to see a recommendation of an increased employer portion. We are one of the worst in the SEC, and we should be a market leader and not a market lagger. And I know there was a bill passed last year, and so I think it's Senate Bill 18, where they're paying for COLAs as the reduction of the employer unfunded liability is paid. So as that's reducing, they're just taking a little bit to start paying for COLAs, which is a fantastic idea. But as that is reducing, it would be nice if we could also invest in the ORP participants and maybe start adding a little percentage at a time until we at least get to a 1-to-1 match, where if we're asking our employees to do 8, that we're willing as an employer to also do 8% at a minimum. Is my suggestion. And then I think there's also a recommendation needed for some language that is affecting the definition of post-secondary institutions that I think is impacting the RCC or.
We have, it's 5 of our 12 colleges currently are considered post-secondary instead of higher ed. And currently it's being interpreted that those 2 terms are different. So I can't offer ORP to the ones that are post-secondary.
I think the recommendation for that would just be add post-secondary to the statute. Allow those institutions.
Let's see, so right now, let me go through what I have on the list to make sure we're getting there. All right, I'll look at changing from 5-year to 7-year. Some sort of ORP participation in TSRL as either an advisory committee or something like that. the Louisiana Association of Faculty Senate's creating a committee to be
We can
To
look
pro-
at it, but
looking at that. Changing or looking at the vendor selection, whether increasing the number of vendors in law, while that may not have an impact on the number of people that apply, just having that option. Increased advocacy through mailings or some sort of way, Carrie, I think that's what you were talking about, some sort of newsletter or something. But also trainings for, I guess that would be new hires or those that are looking at wanting to switch. That puts me at 5, I think, or 6. Yeah, and then I have increasing employer contributions for ORP with, I guess, a goal to get to at least the 8%, I guess it could depend, either 7.5 or 8%, depending on the employee. Then, the change from adding post-secondary to higher education institution so that your 5 institutions,
Eligibility.
yeah. Okay, wait, yep,
I just wanted to the training, I just like some wording which suggests some friendly mandating.
some volley.
Punitive, it's friendly mandating that you must learn this before you
Right.
can make this
Where
change.
you're not-
Professor statement right there.
You're not just relying on the HR person you're
Yes.
dealing with, like, there has to be another level where you get this information, no matter what that level. That person might have had a bad day, they're just like, hey, sign this. Or you might have somebody who's really financially literate and can walk you through it, but there was some mechanism where, like, you're gonna at least get a minimum. This is the information you're gonna take to make this decision. I think that would be huge. Cause like when I signed, it was, yeah, what should I do? I was young and it's like, well, do this one if you think you're gonna be here 30 years and do this one if you're not. It's like, it's a little more complicated than
They make some very cool training videos that I have to watch every year.
Exactly.
I was gonna add a long time ago, I agree, completely agree. What we really need, the trainings, I don't want an annual training on finance,
Yeah.
sorry to say, I don't. But I do want my HR, I want my campus people, my personnel to have the tools.
Right.
To be a little, now, they don't want to take the responsibility, they're not supposed to, their job is to explain your options and let you go and make your choices. However, if they had better tools to share with us, then we would all be the friendly mandate,
Right.
loosely mandated to read these because your time's ticking, you have 60 days. Here's your stuff, but I don't want an annual training, ever, never, never.
Mandated twice.
But
At hire before you make that
Right.
choice, and then within that 7-year window, I'm pushing for the 7. Within that 7-year window, if you're thinking about switching, you have to go through the training again.
sure thing, but our human resources, I think they need more tools. They need more tools. They will share the tools with us. There is no doubt, I feel confident that if they had more tools, the communication would be stronger.
But I would just add to that too, you can't take the human element out. So everybody, there's, thousands of individuals talking to people about this or how many ever. But I know in our system for health, I don't think our employees take advantage of it, but we have this thing called jellyfish through our health insurance. And they basically can go through and it talks to you about if you want to, possibly on the high deductible, how an HSA can help. Like, I do think there are tools that could be put together. And if you're going into ORP, okay, I'm sorry, you need to go through this because it is such a massive decision.
That's right.
And when you put in the, that is, you can't change it later, that it's irrevocable. I do think there's things that could be done to really enhance that.
All right.
I'd also like just to add, I don't know if this is even possible, but it would be just for uniformity of treatment of employees making these decisions, a mandatory waiting period to make the retirement decision would be very helpful. Because you won't end up in a situation where you have 60 days, but check here. Because it depends on who you're talking to. It depends on on how you're engaging with that decision and making sure that there's a built-in delay in making that decision would be helpful to the deciders.
So, here, is that a recommendation for? Okay,
I was gonna ask earlier, what's the reasoning for 60 days? Why that number was selected however many years ago?
I do not know. Yeah.
I don't know. That was
Why?
1989.
1989, so we weren't around.
If you don't put some, if you don't put some kind of deadline on it, a lot of people.
Well,
won't
it's
make a
great, but why
decision.
60 days?
They are giving it back to you based on your hire date, and so by you delaying too much longer, you are losing out on investment increases or decreases based on market and getting the money into the account. So you are delaying it because payroll has to take those deductions, people have to move deductions, so that's the only thing.
But I mean, if you're gonna maybe be somewhere for 25, 35 years, what's 90 days or 120 days? Yeah, if I wanna start my investments, I'm not gonna take my 120 days. I'm gonna take my 10 and a half, you know? I was one of those individuals that said, if you don't click this button in 60 days, you're forced over here. And I just decided, fine, force me. And I'm in the ORP because I was hired, you know, as an assistant professor at age 30. So, and I was widowed and I was like, not even a Louisiana state. So, you know, I'm a Washington state girl. So I was like, I don't know. You gonna force me? I won't do anything in 60 days. I went to ORP. That what they chose my vendor. I did choose my vendor. So that's just, it's whatever that number is, the history of it, I just.
You default into the DB, so you would have chosen the ORP and then chose your vendors. Cause your default, if you don't make that choice, is into the DB.
Right, and I
then
chose the TIA track. No, or it was way before we had TIA track.
We've had them since the beginning.
Since
If you
06.
don't choose
Oh,
you're
yeah.
forced to ORP, is that what you're saying?
No, I had it reversed.
Forced to the DB.
Oh.
I had it reversed.
Good jobs, that's what-
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been a vendor since 1990.
So Matt, will we have an opportunity to add to these recommendations as we talk to our colleagues?
Yeah, I think so.
before the
So-
November meeting?
Yeah, so I think that'll be something when, I mean, this is all a really good start. When we, so the November meeting, which I know I'll get to the November. Let's,
I just want to add, in terms of additional recommendations,
Yeah.
I think I'm looking at the part of right now, current state.
Mhm.
And we can talk about recruitment of assistant professors in the 7-year window, but I think we also need to think about really have a deep dive into retention right now, particularly for certain groups that we want to keep in the state
Yeah.
right now. And I think we haven't been addressing that. Communication is great, making sure tenure assistant professors that come in is great. But we need to figure out what we need to do right now to be competitive from SEC peers and
and
other
I think that
peers.
goes to Chantel's
Yeah.
point about the employer contribution rate increasing, I think would probably impact that as far as recruitment goes. Okay, yeah, okay, so are there any other? Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so I think, just coming back to Keena's point, I, maybe it's like a very outlier idea, but like it fits like 0.8 of the state task force, that we should be aware of various possibilities which other universities are doing and so on. And one thing which I have found, which is pretty novel, is what is called as the phased retirement. And I would like if somebody can, like the auditor can probably look into, like if we have like extremely prestigious universities doing phased retirement which really helps retention rates, where people like want to stay in the state, people want to stay in the system. And then the university's health also improves in the way like there are like senior professors who are not like, I don't want to use any wrong word, like those who are not as efficient as they were younger. Like there is now a timeline where the university, the defined benefits plan, the defined contributions plan can look into like, well, these are the people who are going to retire after 5 years, know that they have entered this phased retirement agreement voluntarily. And how does it changes the financial picture both for defined benefit and defined contribution. University of North Carolina had a very extensive study on it, like they have been doing that for a very long time. And I think that really helped their retention rates, that really improved the health of their defined benefit and defined contribution system. So I'm not sure, like, I think it's too late in the game probably, but if the auditor can look into this possibility, or if anyone in TRSL has more insights into this, whether we have ever.
How do those programs work?
So basically, the idea is that, let us say someone is at the age of 60 and he has or she has already been there for 20 years in the system. The idea is that the faculty voluntarily enters this phased retirement in which he promises that after 5 years, he's going to retire, let us say.
They take a reduced.
And then there is a reduction in the salary, 100% to 75%, 50%, and so on. The faculty can start taking retirement benefits while in the phased retirement, depending on a prorated value, like how he has reduced his job. He can shift to newer venues, for example, like let us say I can tell you very honestly, like I have extremely brilliant colleagues who are in 60s and who just want to quit the state. They say like, I'm just going to retire. I'm going to retire in the spring and I'm just going to leave the state. I think that's a huge brain drain from the state in a way. Yes, I probably doesn't answer the mid-level faculty members, but the senior faculty members also we don't want to lose. We want to make the state attractive for them somehow. I think like it needs us, at least like we should think about it, whether it's possible for our state, like to have such a thing. What will be an impact on, I don't think it will impact the defined benefits, but it will certainly impact the ORP participants more. I'm not sure how positively or negatively, but there are some excellent universities doing that.
So there probably is a way that something could be structured, but I think you're right. Kenny would have to model something out and look at it. The one thing we'd have to be careful of, there are certain rules around what's called an in-service distribution. So if you're still a member of the defined benefit plan and the plan makes a distribution to you, there's only certain instances where that's allowed under federal law. So that would be something we would have to look into.
So I think what I've found was that most of the people who are on defined benefits don't tend to go into phased retirement, but it's an attractive option for ORP participants.
I don't know the rules, how that would work with a DC.
The second thing I would like to request is, and I think that came up in the last meeting, I think we had 2 university systems where the employee had an option to contribute more. And then there was an employer match up to a certain number. Like, I don't know, like how we can increase the employer contributions in principle in our state, but like, at least like employees who are saving well, like they should be given an option that can I put more in my ORP? And
so if we were to do that for our ORP, the only way we can currently do additional voluntary contributions would be post-tax contributions. If we wanted to allow additional voluntary pre-tax contributions, all of the windows for making any kind of options would have to go away. So you would have to choose on day one, I want the ORP or the DB if we wanted additional pre-tax contributions. But it would be possible to change the plan to allow additional voluntary post-tax contributions to the ORP.
And do you think there can be an employer match for post-tax contributions?
I don't know.
I think that would be.
I had mentioned the idea, so I ran it past our tax council, and I didn't ask about the employer portion. I just asked, would it be possible for employees to but I follow up.
I think that would be a system and institution decision on the employer piece if there wanted to be a match there, I would guess.
I would assume.
any other proposed recommendations at this time? All right, it's a good list to go through. So now, other business. Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. So I think this, I think this goes to your point of I'd like to add an additional meeting date in November, just so that, number one, what's been thrown out right here, we can kind of talk amongst colleagues and see how that works, and if there's anything else that we can refine it over that time or new ones come up. So that in November, we can discuss on, these are the recommendations that we want to move forward with in the creation of a final report. And then when we get to December, we have a final report that we are voting on, that this is what we want to submit to the legislature. So to your point, if you want to seek additional comment from your colleagues and faculty and all that, then yes, let's do that. And then we'll meet it towards the end of November to bring all those in and finish it all out. And then December, we're good to go. So.
Man, can I suggest a different date than the?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
so in all fairness, I was keeping it on a Wednesday because we're used to that, but that's why there's a star.
So the week of Thanksgiving probably doesn't work for anybody.
At least not the day before.
All right, let's see, so we could do the 20th, November 20th.
May I ask, does it have to be a Wednesday?
It does not have to be a Wednesday.
It's just, y'all are used to it, that's
I
why.
thought it was a Thursday,
Okay,
or a Tuesday, or a Friday, not a Monday or a Wednesday.
okay.
Right now. Could we do it maybe the week after Thanksgiving, because the legislature is gonna be in session
Yeah.
until the 25th?
Yeah, that would give us
But that would
some,
only give you a little time to write the final report.
yeah, that's okay.
Short and sweet.
We appreciate that.
I mean, yeah, 2 weeks is enough time, I think. So if we did the week after Thanksgiving, so Wednesday the
before.
4th, or let's see, Monday's the 2nd. I mean, would y'all be okay with Monday, just so that gives,
That's the last week of our semester. So, I mean, everybody has their own personal problems. If it actually could be like, say, Thursday, December 5, I would be like phenomenal.
we could do an afternoon meeting, because I know you teach that morning. Just because I know my vice chair's schedule and teaching schedule. I just go and hang out in his class sometimes. So Thursday, November 5th in the afternoon.
November.
December, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, cool. All right, so let's,
Yep.
all right, so we'll do 1 o'clock. December 5th. And then we'll reconvene in less than 2 weeks to finish this thing up.
Advance notice, I am not sure if I'll be here for the 18th.
Okay.
December 18th meeting.
Well, you get all your comments in on the. We'll carry those forward. All right. Okay, that has been taken care of. Anything else to come before this committee? Or this task force? All right, let's see, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All right, Gina?
Second.
Perfect, all right. Thank you all, and we'll see you December 5th.
Okay.